guys, it's Rachel here with Senza Tempo Cane Corso. So we're here with pup date number 2. The puppies are looking fantastic. We did the tails today. So for those of you that were wondering when it's done when the puppies are very young. As you can see, they are totally not bothered by it. In fact, when they brought them out, because of COVID, you can't go in the veterinary office. So when they brought them out in the little laundry basket that we had them in, they weren't even crying. So, really, cat? My cat just opened up that door. No! You! I will feed you in a minute. Falcor, why are you being a bad cat? It's my shirt on the floor. I need to clean that up. Okay. I was in a rush to get out the door earlier. So anyway, so tails are done. They look really good. Let me get these 2 little guys. Little girls, actually. Come on. Oh, and one more. Come on. Alrighty. Big Bertha. So, but yeah, tail lengths look really good. My vet uses some stitches at the end. Glad they don't do the clamping method. I'm not a fan of that one. But yeah, they really don't seem to be bothered by it at all. Mom's licking them, as you can see in that area. Not at all in pain. They're not on any pain medication. So that's why it's done so young. I know that a lot of people don't like it. But there's some of us that don't like spay and neuter or I would say at least neuter, and people still do that. So to each their own. I did want to kind of go into the history of that. So there is a lot of misinformation regarding surgeries like tail docking and ear cropping. And I've seen that in Detroit, maybe not Detroit, but in Michigan. I believe it's Michigan. They are trying to ban ear cropping. I don't know if they're trying to do tail docking, but I would assume that those same people would be trying to do the same thing. And while I do think that really it's a losing battle, and in the end they will ban it for sure, I will say that I do think that it is. I do think that it's the wrong thing to do, and I'll tell you why. So a lot of people think that ear cropping and tail docking is done for aesthetics, right? They think that the reason that people do it is because people like to have tough looking dogs, right? And so for some reason, we think that if we remove the tail and the ears, that makes the dog look tougher. And while there have been studies to show that people do see short, cropped eared dogs as being more aggressive, I don't think that there's any correlation with tail docking. But I did want to kind of get into the history of it a bit. So, the reality is that ear cropping and tail docking was done long before anybody cared about trying to make their dogs look tough. Most of these dogs and dogs that had it done lived on farms. They were never really seen by people. They weren't taken out into social settings. It was 100% functionality. And the reason for that is because most of these people, you're talking about a time when veterinarians were far and few. People didn't want to spend the money on veterinarians. And you live on a farm, and just getting to a vet was a big deal. And not to mention that for anybody that's ever had an injury to an ear, maybe you've dealt with a hematoma, which is basically it's inflammation between the ear flap, the part of the ear that lays down here. So on a long-eared or on a floppy-eared dog, the part that's floppy basically gets a big pocket of blood and pus in it. And so, and that can happen from scratching the ear, it just injury of some type of, some slight trauma to the ear can cause that. And so that was an issue. And then, of course, a lot of these animals, when you're dealing with a kind of a ranch environment or farm environment, or a lot of these animals were also used for hunting. They were used for protection of livestock. We're not talking like, even if it wasn't used as like a general livestock guardian. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in the country. We had dogs, and every now and then a raccoon might scamper up on the property. And we had like a Dalmatian pit mix and a Samoyed, or a Samoyed as they're called. And they killed a raccoon on our porch one time. So in the case that something, or maybe a stray dog or coyote or whatever it was, came on the property and there was a scuffle, the ears tend to be the first thing to get latched on. Why? Because it's easy to grab. If you've ever watched, there's a video that was going around viral for a while. It was like, it was a South African Mastiff, and there was a guy who tried to break in, and he was, trying to get away from the Mastiff. And the way that he was doing it was by grabbing the ears of the dog and trying to hold the head back. So if a large dog wants to attack you, and it has you down, one of the ways you can keep them teeth from trying to get to you is to grab both sides of the head, those ears, and kind of, do your best to kind of keep it away. Now, that may or may not be, successful, but nonetheless, it is something that, people have been known to do as far as that video is concerned, and I'm sure others. And it's what animals do. That's why people that had early pit dogs would always crop the ears, because that's the first thing to go. So it was a practical thing, because whenever you have something, an appendage that is kind of hanging off the body, like ears, dogs, whenever there's irritation there, they're gonna flap their head, right? They're gonna shake their head, and that kind of force on the ears, it causes it to continually, causes the pressure, like blood pressure, to kind of, it's hard to explain because I personally, mine are cropped, you know what I mean? But basically it causes the injury to not heal, you know what I mean? And so you end up having to kind of, if you've ever seen a dog, and you can kind of Google it, or how they deal with the hematoma to the ear, you have to basically like almost tape the ear to the head. You have to like fill the whole ear canal and all this stuff in here. You have to fill all that with like gauze, and then tape it all up, and then tape it around the head like you would like a head trauma victim, just to keep it from like the pressure from building in the flaps of the ears, from them just, like a good example of that would be if you were to take your arm and like spin in a circle with your arms out, you'll find that your blood pressure goes to your fingers, right? So it's the same type of thing. The momentum will push that blood to the end of the appendage, which is the ears, and it would just be almost impossible to heal. And it's, when you're dealing with a dirty farm environment and you're trying to work, you don't have the ability to constantly be, fixing the bandages and keeping the bandages clean and blah, blah, blah. It made more sense back then to just go ahead, crop them when they're young. Don't ever worry about it. You know what I mean? It was a preventative surgery. Okay. That's what it was. Preventative surgery. Same thing with ear infections. Like I said, yeast infections of the ear, and as well, like I said, hematomas. And if you Google those items on their own, how common are ear hematomas? How common are ear infections? You will find that these are very common situations that dogs go through. Now, doesn't mean that if you don't crop your dog's ears that your dog will get an ear infection. No, there's plenty of dogs that have not had cropped ears that have not had ear infections. It's kind of like saying that, well, just because a dog is not spayed or neutered doesn't mean that dog is going to breed, right? It's not a guarantee. It's just a preventative. So, in case of argument, right? So for people to say, oh, it's just cosmetic. Oh, it's just cosmetic. No, it's never been just cosmetic ever. So that's a lie. And my thing about it is if a person just doesn't want to do it because they don't like it, then that's fine. That's one thing. That's up to you. But to lie about it and say, oh, well, it's just cosmetic, you just like the way it looks, well, that's not being honest. You know what I mean? You can dislike something without needing to lie about it. You know what I mean? So, preventative, okay? That's what it is. Tail docking, same thing. Tails could get injured, especially when you were on the ranch, because cows will step on it. Like, they'll be laying out in the field, a horse or a cow could step on the tail. They could break the tail. Same thing with protection dogs. You can very, very effectively keep a dog from attacking you by holding onto that tail and kind of keeping that animal from getting a hold of you. So for protection breeds, always removed for that reason. You don't ever want to have an animal get, a person get the upper hand on your animal. So anyway, so that's why they were removed. Not because old farmers back in the day like to brag to their other farmer friends about how awesome their dog looks with no ears and no tail. That's why, like cattle dogs, for example, have no tail. You know what I mean? Not all of them, but a lot of them, like the Australian cattle dog. A lot of old school herding dogs don't have tails for that reason. So anyway, there is such a thing as happy tail. I'm not going to say, I don't know how common it is with Mastiffs. I do know that many people have spoken about the fact that when you have a tail as big as a Corso's, as thick as a Corso's, when they're wagging their tail and maybe they go through a door and they hit that tail on the door frame, that it can break the tail. And that's, it's not something that I personally have seen, but then again, I don't have Mastiffs with tails, right? So that's not something that I would know about. But I have seen happy tail, and I know that there was one place, I forget where it was, where they actually reversed a law where they had banned docking. They actually reversed it for certain breeds because of the amount of injury. And the tail's another one of those things where once it's damaged, very hard to heal because of the same thing. You're, especially whenever it's, for whatever reason, it tends to be usually like the tip of it. I think that's where they call it happy tail, where the tail is wagging so fast that the tip hits everything and it ends up getting bloody, and then it doesn't heal because, like I said, when all that pressure gets put to the end of the appendage just from the movement of it, then they end up like spraying blood all over the place. It's really crazy. And there are lots of pictures online to show this. So it is, like I said, it was for practical reasons. It was not for aesthetics. Now, another side to that, I'll tell you a story. So when I was a kid, as I told you guys, I was in foster care, right? So there was this woman who was going to be my foster mom, and she was a vet tech at a veterinary hospital in Bastrop. And they were large and small animals. And for those of you that have watched Dr. Pole, you actually know what this procedure is. And so what they do is they run a cow through a chute, and then they hold it in the chute, and then they have this big device. It's kind of like the same device that you would use for nail clipping on dogs. Like you put the nail through, which is with this, you put the horn through, and then you have this kind of lever, and it slices through. And it slices through the horn, but it also slices through the skin and everything underneath it to prevent the horn from growing back. And then they would take a hot iron and they would burn it, and then they would take this purple spray and they would spray it, which is like a antibacterial spray that they would put on it. And I was a kid. I was like, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old when I saw this. And my knees are hurting. And so the cows let out this absolutely blood-curdling scream because there's no sedation like we use with dogs. There's none of that. They, it's and then the smell afterwards when they burn it. For me, I was absolutely horrified. I was disgusted. I was horrified. I had been sitting on top of some cattle panels or whatever they call it, horse panels, whatever it is, that metal kind of wide fencing that they use in barns. And I hopped off, horrified. And this cowboy saw me, and I'm sure he was like, oh God, we're going to have another PETA member. And so he went and kind of intercepted me as I was leaving. And he was like, come over here, and he took me over to where the cows that had already had it done were. And they were all fine. They were eating. It was like nothing had happened. Kind of like these puppies are here when their tails are done. It was as if nothing had happened. If you hadn't have known better, you would have never known that they had just gone through that. And then he told me about why it's done. You know what I mean? Because not only can they injure people, they can kill people, which cows can kill people anyway, and they do. But it makes it a lot harder for them. Like they can't basically, disembowel you with them when they don't have their horns, and they also can't injure each other, whether it be on purpose or accidental. And so it is really a preventative to keep them safe and keep the people working around them safe. And while some people may agree or disagree on the way that it's done, that's the way it's done. And that is where ear cropping and tail docking comes from. It comes from a time where people didn't want to mess with the what if. They just removed any possible problems to start with. That way it wasn't a problem later on. When you lived a hard life like our ancestors did before us, when people didn't have a lot of money and they couldn't just jump in their car and run to the vet, you had to minimize the amount of problems that you could have. And so preventative surgeries was something that was done. And so it's not like people think their cows look cooler without horns, right? And even goats, they do it with goats too. It's not because they think they look cooler or meaner. It's done because it's a practical preventative surgery. So that's where this comes from. Do I think that people are going to listen to that? No, I don't. I think that we've come to a point in human behavior where we are now. We used to be very logical, right? Not to say that humans have never been emotional. For sure we have. It's a defining characteristic of humanity. But we used to have very logical decisions when it came to animals. And now we just don't. Everything is super duper duper emotional. We've kind of swung, the pendulum has swung in the other direction. And so, I don't think that it's a fight that we'll ever win. I do think that we're going to get to the point where there will be no more cropping and docking. And there will be a lot of animals that are going to suffer because of that. Because they're going to have animals that have chronic ear infections, chronic hematoma, chronic tail situations where eventually they will remove them, but only after the animal has suffered through lots of surgeries, lots of I'm sure that you could imagine having an infected body part, like I said, with the ears. If you've watched Dr. Pol, there was a Labrador that had a tail injury, and they kept trying to save the tail. And so the whole time, this dog is in a lot of pain, and it's rotting, and they finally give up, and they're like, okay, well, let's go ahead and remove it, right? There was another dog with an ear hematoma. There was a goat, actually, with an ear hematoma. And that's not to say that it's only floppy-eared animals that get ear hematomas. It's not. But there is, when you crop an ear, there's less of that tissue that would get inflamed, right? So the less of the ear that is there, the less likely you're going to have an injury like that. So, like I said, completely preventative, that's what it is. Dogs can be aggressive. People take their dogs to dog parks. They fight. People have fights within their own home. Ears get injured. It was just a way of really kind of, preventing something from being worse. So that's why it was done. That's the reality behind it. Now I'm going to get into, for example, spay and neuter, right? Like my whole argument has always been, why is it that it's not okay to crop ears and dock tails, but it is okay to spay and neuter, which is also done as a preventative. You know what I mean? Like people who say you should spay and neuter say that because of shelter dogs. That's what they say. They're like, oh, you should because, shelter dogs, yada, yada. But it's like, just because your dog is not fixed does not mean that your dog is going to breed. It's not a guarantee. So it's a preventative, right? And even they know it's not a guarantee, but they don't want you to take the chance. So they want your dog to go through a surgery that has all the risks of ear cropping and tail docking, right? Anytime you anesthetize a dog, you're running the same gauntlet of risks, but they're okay with you taking those risks because in their eyes, their reason is important enough to do it, right? Ear cropping, tail docking, not important enough, but the potential for that animal to reproduce is important enough in their eyes, which I personally don't agree with. I do say spay a female because of the risk of pyometra and of breast cancer, but that's a totally separate issue. Once again, I'm looking at it from a preventative, not just of breeding, but also of disease. With neutering a dog, we know, and even with spay, I'm not going to lie, even with spay, we know that there are health issues associated with spay and neuter. There is no question about it. It's been proven time and time again. We know without a shadow of a doubt, if you spay and you neuter, your animals are going to probably live a shorter lifespan, and it's going to be fraught with illness because it has been proven that spay and neuter increases the risks of a host of health issues in the dog. So the difference that I don't understand personally is, why is it okay for us to do a preventative surgery of spay and neuter that we know causes health issues? It's not even a question. It's not speculative. We know it causes health issues. But yet it's not okay to do a preventative surgery for ear cropping and tail docking that does not have any known health issues associated with it, other than the surgery itself, which no matter what you do, you know what I mean, you're going to have to do that anyway, right? Even health testing my dogs. Everybody wants me to health test my dogs, right? Everybody wants a breeder who health tests. Well, guess what? I have to anesthetize my dogs to do that. They have to be literally put under for us to be able to do that surgery. So that risk is asked of breeders regardless of what we're doing, right? So to say, well, we don't want you to incur this risk for ear cropping and tail docking, but we do want you to incur this risk for health testing, it doesn't make any sense. There's so much illogical thinking going into the dog world. And for me, it is very hard to accept. You know what I mean? That's my standpoint on it. It's either okay to do preventative surgeries on a dog or it's not. The way that I see it, you don't get to pick and choose which preventative surgeries that you want to do and which preventative surgeries that you don't think people should do. And I think it's bullying when you tell somebody that they can't do. You call it butchering. I get these people, it would be all these comments. It'd be really nice if the ears and tails weren't butchered off the dogs. And these same people buy, dogs in the shelter that have had their reproductive organs butchered out of them. You know what I mean? And I can tell you from experience, because I've actually gone through a surgery very similar to that. I've had my tubes tied, and I can tell you right now, it is unbelievably painful. Unbelievably painful. There's one thing of like removing an appendage, right? Like having a cut or something like that. It's another whenever you go through multiple layers. You know what I mean? Like you not just the skin, but now you're into the insides of the animal. You know what I mean? It would have been no different if somebody had stabbed me in the gut. You know what I mean? I was walking around with my hands pressed hard against my stomach, just trying to prevent any movement of my body because of the amount of pain that I was in. And I couldn't take any pain medication because I was, not to be too whatever, but I was breastfeeding my daughter and I didn't want her ingesting any of those medications. So I didn't take any. And it was incredibly painful. Any woman that's ever had a tube, tubal ligation can tell you how painful it is. Or even a woman who's had a hysterectomy. My mother had a hysterectomy and she almost lost her mind. That's a whole nother basket of worms right there. Whenever you remove the reproductive hormones, it is closely linked to your sanity. So for me personally, I think that it's ridiculous, and that's just my personal say on it. I've spoken about this before, but I just felt, whatever, the channel's grown. I haven't done a video like this in a while, why not? So there it is. You know what I mean? You may not agree, you may agree. And like I said, I don't think that we'll win this battle. I don't. I absolutely believe wholeheartedly that they will ban cropping and docking. Not because it should be done, not because it's logical to do, but because it's an emotional argument. It sounds good. You know what I mean? And the vets will make a lot of money off of it, truth be told. Because if you can't crop or dock, whenever your animals go through these issues that it was originally done for, who do you go to? Well, you go to your vet. And a lot of these are chronic issues. So not only do you go to the vet the one time, you're going to have to keep going back. And they get to make money every single time you come back. And everybody thinks that it's, being done for the right reasons. And in reality, I think it's just a big money grab, if I'm being entirely honest. I think it's that, and I think it's also people taking advantage of emotional people that don't do the research. They don't know why it was done. They think that it's just strict dog fighters, and they think it's mean and it's cruel, and they've never really given it much thought, and they're taking advantage of people like that. And for me, I think that it's ridiculous. But we live in a time where a lot of things like that don't make sense. You know what I mean? It's one of the things about being an adult is realizing that life sometimes just doesn't make sense, and you just have to live with it. So anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed that little talk on the matter. And so I'm fully aware of the fact that there are veterinary journals and organizations that stand against ear cropping. But I don't see them standing against spay and neuter, so I don't care what they have to say about it. I've done quite a bit of research into, it's hard to find studies on this kind of stuff because they know what you're looking for, so there's a lot of bias. But there are some studies out there that will be truthful about the fact that ear infections are most common in dogs with floppy ears, pendulous ears. There's a reason for that. They'll if you read those, and then they'll try to put a caveat, and you have to pay attention to the wording. Like they'll say things like, one of the things I saw is they'll say there's not enough evidence or there's not enough data as of yet to prove that ear cropping this and that. You know what I mean? And that's because they don't want to do any research into it. You know what I mean? If you never do any research, which I've never seen a study on checking to see whether or not animals with cropped ears have less ear infections and less ear hematomas than those that do not, then you will never know that. And they're not interested in doing those studies because it could very well prove them wrong. So, I would just caution you, if you were ever trying to look for the truth of something, you have to investigate all sides of it, all the variables. You have to actually look for the truth. You can't refuse to look at data that may very well prove you wrong. So anyway, like I said, do I think we're going to get anywhere with it? No. Do I think that it's going to happen? Absolutely. And that'll just be what it is. And I don't think it'll ever change either. I think that it's one of those things where they're going to win that one, and people are not going to know the wiser. They're not going to realize that they're being played when their dog goes in for chronic ear infections. They'll never think about the fact that maybe their dog wouldn't have had to have done that had the dog's ears been cropped. You know what I mean? They're not. I guarantee it won't even occur to them. So we just don't live in that time anymore. So anyway, like I said, I hope that you guys are enjoying your day. I hope you guys enjoy this little pup date. I know there are some people that, want it to strictly be about the puppies, but I'm sorry, there ain't really much going on right now. I could show you a little 5-minute clip of them, moving around, but they don't have personalities yet. They're not really doing anything yet. So I do have to kind of, you know, find other things to talk about. And that's what my channel is about. My channel is about educating people. It's not just about showing you cute puppies. So that's like an added bonus, but I always try to use every opportunity as a teaching moment. And that's exactly what this is for me. So, you know, maybe we can change a couple minds. Maybe we could, you know, make it to where at least some states won't ban it, where people who want to have it done can still do it. But like I said, I think we're kind of past that point. So anyway, I'm crybaby. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll talk at you later. Bye.